We take these three great Somerset men. Alfred the Great, the first Eurosceptic. He got rid of the Danes and made England independent. Alfage, the low-tax martyr, and John Locke for the legislature for the people against the executive. However long I represent North East Somerset for, I will take these three as my great heroes and hope to model my political words on their thoughts. Mr. Deputy Speaker, thank you very much.
Mr. Tom Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I'm not sure I'm up to the task of following such an eloquent and entertaining and frankly self-assured maiden speech as the one from the honourable gentleman. Not since the days of Boris Johnson in this chamber have we been treated to such a colourful and imaginative and very evocative retelling of our history, and I have to say to the honourable gentleman that he will do extremely well in this chamber, I have absolutely no doubt, and extremely well on his own government's front bench at some point soon, and I'm sure that if he holds on to his seat long enough after the next general election, he'll make an excellent addition to the shadow cabinet. I was elected to this House precisely 9 years ago, 9 years ago today, and I made my maiden speech a few weeks after that, coincidentally, in the Queen's Speech debate on the Constitution and Home Affairs. And during that speech, I made mention of the fact that a commitment to electoral reform was absent from that year's, from the government's agenda that year, and I made mention also that I hoped that absence of electoral reform would be a recurring feature of future Queen's speeches. Unfortunately, alas and alack, we now face a government which is committed to a referendum on electoral reform, specifically on replacing first past the post with the alternative vote. As far as the referendum is concerned, I am somewhat bewildered that in this new age of Aquarius, this new dawn of democracy, the new politics, we are left with a government which is, both parties of which campaigned against a referendum on the alternative vote, but which is now actually implementing a referendum on the alternative vote. And I hope that those of us who use the phrase "the new politics" will henceforth remember to indicate the irony of that phrase by perhaps using air quotes when they actually say the words the new politics. The Liberals continue to oppose the alternative vote in principle, but support it in practice because they see it as a stepping stone to further electoral reform. The Conservative Party, they still oppose the alternative vote in principle, but they support in practice because it's the only way that they can keep hold of their ministerial Oyster cards. And there is something peculiarly undemocratic about that situation. I personally am looking forward, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to campaigning for the retention of first past the post in my constituency and throughout the rest of the country. It is not a good system for electing MPs. I'll say that at the outset. It is a rubbish system of electing MPs, but it has the unique value of being slightly less rubbish than all the alternatives. And I don't want to see us moving to a situation where we have, further electoral reform, to a situation where the decision of who forms the government, the decision about who becomes Prime Minister, is taken from the hands of the electorate and given to a single individual who happens to be the leader of the Liberal Democrats. I do not see anything remotely democratic in that situation. Just after the election results were known, a number of my colleagues on these benches went on television to talk about, and I quote, our friends in the Liberal Democrats. These are the same people who have supported electoral reform in some form or other over many years because they have the view that there is a permanent progressive majority in this country which, given the opportunity and the right electoral system, would put in place a permanent anti-Conservative coalition. Now, leaving aside the very dodgy democratic credentials of such a proposal, I would ask my friends on this side of the chamber if they still believe that the centre of gravity of the Liberal Democratic Party is on the left of British politics. I would ask them to look across this chamber and actually look at the evidence of their own eyes, because I do not believe that the Liberal Democrats would be an appropriate partner for the Labour Party in a future coalition government. After all, I don't want to touch them with a barge pole. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I know where they've been. The new politics, my favourite part of the new politics so far, has been watching Liberal Democrats arguing that black is white, that north is south, and that short money was ever intended for government parties. But I have some reassurance for the members opposite. If they're genuinely worried about a closing down of a valued and regular source of income, and I totally understand that, I have some words of comfort for them, because as far as I understand, I may be wrong on this, but as far as I understand, they are now qualifying for Ashcroft money. What I wanted to conclude with, Mr. Deputy Speaker, because I don't want to take up too much time, there's been a lot of talk in our considered amendment talks about the government's proposed caps on immigration. I want to make a suggestion, a departure from policy, from my own party's policy and from the policy of any other party. And this is just effectively thinking out loud, having listened closely and carefully to the views of my own constituents during the election campaign. There is a lot of concern about immigration, but we cannot avoid the fact that there is a lot of concern not only about non-EU immigration, but EU immigration. And I wonder if we have got to the position where, like the French citizens until 2 years ago, whether we should at last be offering the people of this country a referendum whenever we take the decision to enlarge the EU, and give the people of this country ownership of those decisions and fight for the arguments in favour of expanding the EU. Those arguments are strong. I think they're unanswerable. But if we, the political elite, insist on making those decisions ourselves without consulting the public, I think we are going to reap the whirlwind in terms of disenchantment with the EU and a possible collapse of support to the far right.